Hey guys, good evening, or perhaps a gentle good morning wherever you are in this wide world. Tonight, we're going to embark on a journey not into thrilling battles or dramatic political intrigues, but into something a little more fundamental, perhaps a bit dusty, and undeniably challenging: the everyday reality of being a soldier in the Mongol army. We're talking about the 13th and 14th centuries, a time when the Mongol Empire was expanding across Eurasia in an unprecedented way. Sight 1. You might think you're tough, adaptable, even capable of handling whatever life throws at you. But have you ever truly wondered if you could last even a single day in a world utterly different from your own? A world where survival was a constant, grueling test. It's a question that delves not into grand strategies or glorious victories, but into the raw, unfiltered truth of daily existence. Imagine a life where every breath is a challenge, every step a struggle against the elements and the sheer demands of an unyielding military machine. Tonight, we won't be focusing on the shiny armor or the triumphant trumpets, but on the ache in your muscles, the constant hunger, the biting cold, and the relentless rhythm of a life lived entirely on horseback. Before we gently ease into this historical landscape, if you find these quiet explorations of history soothing for your mind and helpful for your sleep, a soft tap on the like button or a quiet subscribe would truly mean a lot. And feel free to share in the comments below where you're currently listening from and what time it is for you. It's always nice to know we're sharing this moment of tranquil discovery together. So, with that, it's time to dim the lights, maybe turn on a gentle fan for some background hum, or perhaps just listen to the rhythmic patter of rain outside your window. Let's drift together into the fascinating, yet perhaps a little bit tedious, realities of Mongol military life. Sweet dreams, and let's begin our quiet journey into a forgotten day. Dawn on the steppe. Life begins with the horse. Imagine waking up, not to the gentle chime of an alarm, but to the sharp sting of cold seeping into your bones. You've been sleeping a fitful, shallow sleep, not on a soft mattress, but on a rough animal hide, spread directly on the cold earth. Outside your thin felt tent, or jur, a dense fog hangs so thick you can't quite see your outstretched hand, and a sharp, biting chill gnaws at every muscle. There's no warm coffee to greet you, only the faint jingle of bells from the horses grazing nearby, the whisper of the wind through the sparse canvas, and the damp, biting dampness of the air itself. This isn't just discomfort, it's the constant, grinding reality of a life lived at the mercy of the vast, unforgiving steppe. The sense of a nomadic life, as your eyes slowly adjust to the dim light, a complex scent wafts into your nostrils. It's an intricate mix: the pungent smell of soot from the small cooking fire, the earthy dampness of the soil, the sharp tang of fresh and dried horse manure mingling in the air, and a faint, sour musk of sweat from your comrades sleeping beside you. There's no fragrant soap or minty toothpaste here, just the raw, unadorned truth of nature and existence. The thick soot from the cooking fires often clings to your lungs, and you can feel fine dust coating your skin, your hair, and even settling lightly on your food. Consider this for a moment. Could you truly grow accustomed to waking up each morning in an environment that smells quite like this? There's no concept of a clean daily shower. Water is a precious commodity, typically reserved for drinking or for cooking. Personal hygiene, as we know it, is a distant notion, or at least radically different from what you might imagine. You would quickly learn to accept the scent of your own body and that of those around you because it is an inseparable part of nomadic life. Breakfast. Surprisingly simple, oddly effective. Forget lavish breakfasts with scrambled eggs, crispy bacon, and toasted bread. The first meal of the day for a Mongol warrior was extraordinarily simple, perhaps even unpleasant to your modern palate. Their diet during campaigns relied heavily on animal products, including mare's milk, horse blood, and various meats like mutton, beef, and goat. Your meal might consist of a bit of dried meat, tough as limestone and difficult to chew, salvaged from the day before, or perhaps even more distinctively, a gulp of fermented mare's milk, known as kumis. This unique beverage, sometimes pressed into a dried cake, has a sour, effervescent taste and a mild alcoholic content. It certainly provides energy, but it's far from the soothing, comforting start to the day you might be used to. The Mongols lived by a stark philosophy: meat for men, grass for goats. This high protein, low carbohydrate diet significantly contributed to their agility and stamina. Imagine trying to swallow those tough, stringy pieces of meat while your entire body still aches from the previous night's cold. You wouldn't have the luxury of time to savor or ponder the taste. The sole purpose of the meal is to fuel your body, to give you the raw energy needed to continue the relentless journey. There are no sweet pastries, no fresh vegetables, just extreme practicality. This demands an adaptation that is not merely physical, but deeply mental. You would have to accept that delicious is a luxury not afforded to you. The horse, your inseparable companion. For the Mongols, the horse was not just a means of transport, it was an extension of their very being, the central pillar of their survival. Each Mongol soldier relied on 3 to 5 horses, primarily mares, which served not only for riding but also as a plentiful source of milk. The constant rotation of mounts allowed them to maintain incredible speeds for days on end without exhausting any single animal. This inherent resilience, honed since childhood in the brutal steppe environment of cold, heat, hunger, and thirst, enabled them to ride continuously for days, often even sleeping in the saddle. They could cover extraordinary distances, moving between 60 to 100 miles each day. From the moment they could walk, Mongol children were taught to ride. By adulthood, their equestrian skills were astonishing, as if they and the animal were a single fluid entity. You wouldn't just learn to ride, you would learn to live with your horse. You would have to know how to care for it, feed it, and understand its every subtle movement. Your very survival, quite literally, depended on the health and endurance of your mount. Consider how it would feel to spend nearly your entire day perched atop an animal. There are no comfortable cushioned seats, no smooth suspension systems, only a rough saddle, and every stride of the beast is a jarring shock through your body. At times, you'd find yourself dozing off in the saddle even as your horse continued to move forward. This demands an exquisite sense of balance, a physical adaptation that most of us would never have to experience. The horse is not just transportation, it's a mobile food source and a critical component of logistical independence. Equipment and clothing, the rigors of the elements. What would you wear as a soldier in the Mongol army? Certainly not finely tailored uniforms. Your attire would be rough, practical, and designed to withstand the harsh realities of the steppe. Each soldier was personally responsible for their gear, which included about 22 pounds, 10 kildek of lamellar armor made from leather or metal. You'd carry 2 to 3 bows, one heavier for dismounted use, a lighter one for horseback archery, and 60 arrows per quiver. And a small detail that speaks volumes about daily practicality: a file to sharpen your arrowheads. Regular inspections were conducted to ensure readiness, and if your personal equipment was incomplete, you could be dismissed from the army and sent home. Your clothing would typically be thick, made from wool or sheepskin, or even silk, which was sometimes worn under armor because it made arrow removal easier if you were hit. Clothes were often worn in multiple layers, helping to keep you warm at night and easily shed during the day as temperatures rose. And when it rained, you'd feel your linen cloak clinging to you in ways that defy geometry, heavy, cold, and taking an agonizingly long time to dry. There was no waterproof technology or modern Gore-Tex. Everything was natural, raw, and you simply had to accept the persistent discomfort. Your leather boots, once wet, would quickly become a source of chafing and misery. You would constantly feel damp and chilled in winter, hot and dusty in summer. This was a perpetual battle against the elements. You would quickly come to realize that comfort was a luxury, the goal was survival, and your clothing was a tool for that purpose, not for your ease. The pervasive presence of multiple horses in the animal-centric diet were not isolated facts. They interconnected to form a cohesive system. Horses weren't just transport. They were mobile food sources, integral to logistical independence. The ability to ride continuously for days was directly supported by having spare horses. This anti-vegetable diet reinforced reliance on their nomadic pastoral economy. Mongol soldiers embodied the concept of a living weapon, functioning as a highly mobile, self-sufficient logistical unit. This fundamental integration allowed for unprecedented speed and depth of operation, fundamentally altering the nature of warfare in their era. It starkly contrasted with sedentary armies that relied on fixed agricultural bases and vulnerable, extended supply lines. The endless march, the path of endurance. As the sun begins to peek over the vast horizon, casting long, muted shadows across the steppe, there's no gentle easing into the day. You'll receive the order to assemble almost immediately. No leisurely stretching or morning exercises. You'll quickly mount your horse, your limbs already stiff and protesting from the previous night's cold, and begin another long, arduous journey. The muddy, often foul-smelling paths of temporary encampments will quickly give way to rough, uneven trails, winding through endless grasslands and at times over treacherous mountain passes. This isn't just travel, it's a relentless grinding test of will and body, pushing you to your absolute limits. The rhythm of the march. The Mongol army was legendary for its incredible marching speed. They could cover hundreds of miles in just a few days, a feat almost unimaginable for other armies of their era. This meant you would spend the vast majority of your day on horseback, constantly moving. There were no comfortable rest stops or relaxing picnic breaks. The relentless pace of the march would become the very rhythm of your life. The steady clatter of hooves, the creak of saddles, and the persistent whistle of the wind against your ears would be the sounds you hear most often. You would learn to doze off in the saddle, to eat and drink, even while galloping. Your body would have to adapt to the constant vibrations, the jarring shocks from the uneven terrain. You'd feel every joint protest, every muscle tighten. This is a type of fatigue you've never experienced, a deep exhaustion that goes beyond the physical, permeating your very spirit. The ability to ride continuously for days without stopping was directly supported by having multiple relief horses. This constant movement reduced the need for vulnerable traditional supply lines, allowing for unprecedented speed and depth of operation. No latrines, no privacy. Forget the modern conveniences of sanitation you're accustomed to. In the Mongol army, there were no public latrines or even properly dug pit toilets. When nature called, you simply found a nearby bush or the most discreet spot you could and attended to your needs. This was not only inconvenient, but also potentially dangerous. You could easily become separated from your unit or spotted by an enemy scout. In privacy, it was an utterly foreign concept. You would live, eat, sleep, and fight in a crowded collective. Everyone was in close proximity, and there was no true personal space. This demands a significant psychological adaptation. You would have to learn to overlook the constant inconveniences, to coexist with others in a confined space, and to accept the complete absence of solitary moment. This harsh environment served as a natural, continuous training ground, forging unparalleled mobility, endurance, and combat skills from an early age. Contaminated water and lingering sickness. During the march, access to clean water was a significant challenge. You would have to drink water from any source you could find, rivers, streams, or even stagnant puddles. There was no bottled water or modern filtration systems. Water was often contaminated by animal waste, dirt, and bacteria. You would have to accept that every sip of water carried the potential risk of illness. Each horse, a vital component of the army, needed approximately 5 gallons of water daily, a requirement that could limit the size of forces in arid regions. Illness was a constant threat in the Mongol army. There were no field hospitals equipped with modern medical supplies. Physicians, if available, often relied on folk remedies and rudimentary treatments, sometimes involving strange rituals. Common ailments like dysentery, fevers, or infected wounds could rapidly become severe and fatal. A small cut on your skin could quickly lead to blood poisoning and the end of your life. You would face the fear of disease every single day, and if you fell ill, you would become a burden to the entire army. You might be left behind, or worse, eliminated to ensure the pace of the march. This was a brutal reality of nomadic life, where weakness was rarely tolerated. Their ability to adapt to their harsh environment was key to sustaining their power and expanding their influence. The night, cold and dangerous. As darkness descends, life doesn't get any easier. Temperatures on the steppe can drop rapidly, plummeting below freezing even in summer. You would sleep in a felt tent, a jur or yurt, or simply out in the open, beneath a vast, star-filled but chilling sky. There were no warm furnaces, just small campfires, offering a brief, fleeting warmth. Daily activities in camp included field cooking, learning essential nomadic knots, herding, and lassoing horses. Evenings were often a time for storytelling around the campfire, and danger always lurked. Enemies could attack at any moment, even under the cloak of night. You would have to sleep vigilantly, always ready to spring into action and fight. Guard posts were maintained to protect the camp and the horses from threats like wolves and enemies, reflecting a state of continuous vigilance. The shouts, laughter, and perhaps someone aggressively singing about a goose from a distant corner might be the last sounds you hear before drifting into a restless sleep. Or it could be the clatter of cups, hearty laughter, arguments, the beat of drums, and the clang of bells from a group of inebriated soldiers. There was no absolute peace. You would always feel a subtle tension, a sense that you were never entirely safe. Their unique integration of personal equipment, multiple horses, and an animal-centric diet formed a highly efficient, self-sustaining system, significantly minimizing the need for vulnerable traditional supply lines. This fundamental approach allowed for unprecedented speed and operational depth, profoundly changing the nature of warfare in their era. This stands in stark contrast to sedentary armies that relied on fixed agricultural bases and extended supply chains, highlighting how the severe steppe environment transformed survival necessities into military advantages. Training and discipline forged from childhood. You might assume that modern armies possess the most rigorous training regimens. But for the Mongols, training wasn't a separate specialized program. It was an ingrained part of life. From the moment they were born, there were no military academies or specialized schools in the way we understand them today. Everything was learned through constant practice and immediate application, starting from a very young age. Equestrian skills from infancy. As early as 3 years old, Mongol children were taught how to ride horses and handle a bow, practicing continuously until they were considered full warriors at the age of 16. Women played a crucial role in imparting these fundamental skills. This wasn't merely learning to sit on a horse. It was about mastering the art of combat while mounted. You would learn how to accurately shoot an arrow while galloping, how to twist your body in the saddle to evade incoming arrows, and how to maintain perfect balance even over the most unforgiving terrain. Imagine spending countless hours each day honing these skills, enduring every conceivable weather condition, blistering summer heat, piercing winter cold, across vast featureless steppes with no easy reference points. This wasn't just a skill, it was a second nature, an instinctive response. There was no formal training curriculum in the conventional sense, only the sheer necessity for survival and the desperate need to master your environment. The harsh steppe environment itself served as a natural, continuous training ground, forging unparalleled mobility, endurance, and combat skills, particularly horseback archery, from an early age. Master archers of the steppe. The bow and arrow were the primary weapons of the Mongol army. Every warrior was expected to be a master archer. You would learn to wield the powerful Mongol composite bow, known for its incredible strength and accuracy, capable of shooting farther and piercing armor more effectively than most other bows of the era. Mongol archers were renowned for their exceptional skill, able to shoot down a flying bird while riding at a full gallop. Drawing this bow required immense strength in the arms and shoulders, with a draw weight of up to 160 pounds. You could fire an astonishing 150 arrows within 5 minutes. Their training even included shooting when all four of the horse's hooves were off the ground, ensuring optimal accuracy. You would fire thousands, perhaps tens of thousands, of arrows throughout your lifetime. This wasn't just about hitting a stationary target, it was about striking moving opponents while riding at full speed, in all kinds of light and weather conditions. Every arrow had to be precise, because each one represented a chance at survival for yourself and your comrades. Besides archery, soldiers also practiced proficiency with various other weapons, such as sabers, swords, spears, and lances, adapting their choice to suit specific tasks and combat situations. This lifelong, continuous training was deeply ingrained in their culture, ensuring that each individual was a highly skilled warrior. Iron discipline and shared fear. Discipline within the Mongol army was absolute. Genghis Khan fundamentally reorganized Mongol society into a decimal military structure based on units of 10 Arban, 100, 1,000, and 10,000 Tumen. This system was designed to break down traditional tribal loyalties and foster direct allegiance to the Khan and the new military unit. Each Arban was considered a fundamental unit of both military and social life, expected to live and fight as brothers. Genghis Khan solidified loyalty by sharing the hardships with his soldiers and leading from the front lines. Desertion in battle was punished by the execution of all members of the deserting soldiers' unit. This created an incredibly tight-knit bond within units, reinforced by a shared and palpable fear of collective punishment. You wouldn't dare betray your comrades because death awaited all if one faltered. Talent and ingenuity were highly valued, offering opportunities for soldiers to advance regardless of their social standing or background. Commanders encouraged initiative by not over-interfering with their subordinates' work, allowing them the freedom to achieve their objectives. This system ensured commanders were highly competent and fostered tactical flexibility and individual initiative, going beyond mere rigid drills, tactics, and adaptability. While seemingly barbaric from a modern perspective, the Mongol army was remarkably sophisticated in its tactics. They employed feigned retreats, encirclement maneuvers, and psychological warfare to crush their opponent. The army continuously drilled its troops in formations, maneuvers, and deceptive tactics to react swiftly and decisively to enemy strategies. They were also adept at gathering intelligence and adapting to the terrain and fighting styles of their adversaries. This organic integration of survival skills and military training produced a force where each individual was a highly proficient warrior, far surpassing the typical conscript soldiers of sedentary societies. You would have to learn to understand and execute these complex maneuvers. You would have to work seamlessly as a team because your survival depended on your ability to coordinate with your fellow soldiers. Every individual was a cog in a massive war machine, and any malfunction could lead to disaster. This demanded intense focus and quick reactions in every situation. The strength of the composite bow and the skill of the archers were direct results of this lifelong process. This inherent skill base, combined with their meritocratic system and decentralized command, fostered innovation and tactical adaptability, defining their military success. The environment didn't just influence their warfare, it created their unique military identity and capabilities. The emphasis of Mongol training was not merely military preparation, but a fundamental aspect of steppe survival. Equestrian and archery skills were daily necessity. This relentless lifelong training was deeply ingrained in their culture. Their social engineering, achieved by breaking down tribal loyalties and forming new military units, ensured that soldiers' primary allegiance was to their unit in the combat. This allowed for unprecedented tactical flexibility and mobility, as units could operate independently while maintaining overall coordination. Warfare and survival, where life becomes fragile. When actual battle erupted, you would find yourself in an entirely different world. Everything became chaotic, brutal, and focused on a singular objective: survive. The gentle hum of the steppe wind would be replaced by a cacophony of screams, the groans of the wounded, the clang of metal on metal, and the thunderous roar of horse hooves. It would all blend into one horrific symphony. You would face death from every angle. Arrows would fly like rain, spears would thrust, and sharp blades would be ready to end a life at any moment. The brutality of the battlefield. The Mongol battlefield was not a place for the faint of heart. There were no fair rules or honor in Mongol warfare. The goal was victory at any cost. This meant you would have to fight relentlessly, without mercy, and at times with utter brutality. Genghis Khan's policy was clear: those who surrender will be spared, but those who resist will be destroyed with their wives and children and relatives, so that others who hear and see will be afraid and will not act likewise. Cities were utterly annihilated, and captives were often used as human shields in sieges or to fill moats. This policy also served as a form of psychological warfare, a practical incentive to force cities to surrender. You would participate in these activities. You would have to execute brutal orders, witness horrific scenes, and perhaps even commit such acts yourself. This would undoubtedly impact your psyche, potentially making you more hardened, less emotional. This was not a life where you could retain your innocence or your compassion. The Mongol identity as steppe warriors created a formidable psychological advantage. Their reputation for brutality, reinforced by policies of destruction, instilled fear in the hearts of enemies, often eroding the will to resist even before battle began. Hot living and mobile logistics. During sieges of cities, the Mongol army was famous for its strategy of hot living. They wouldn't waste time or resources feeding prisoners or civilians. They would destroy everything, take what was useful as plunder, and burn the rest. This was both a punishment for the enemy and a way to ensure no threat lingered behind them. This approach also acted as a form of psychological warfare, encouraging surrender. You would be involved in these operations. You would have to carry out harsh commands, witness harrowing sights, and perhaps even commit acts of violence yourself. While seemingly disinterested in logistics, their system was sophisticated, with their supply chain literally moving with them. Their lack of traditional fixed supply lines was, in fact, their greatest logistical advantage. By integrating resupply horses for food transport, mobility, multiple horses, riding endurance, and communication, the RTO relay system, directly into their army structure and daily soldier life, they created a dynamic, self-sufficient logistical system that overcame the weaknesses of conventional armies. This allowed for unprecedented speed, surprise, and operational depth. They could sustain campaigns over vast distances in varied terrain where other armies would falter due to supply constraints. This anti-logistics approach was, in essence, a highly developed form of mobile logistics. Solitude amidst the crowd. Although always part of a collective, the life of a Mongol warrior was also profoundly solitary. You couldn't completely trust anyone, because everyone was fighting for their own survival. You would have to keep your thoughts and emotions to yourself. There was no concept of retirement or a peaceful life after the war. You either died on the battlefield or you continued fighting until you could no longer endure. Success in the Mongol army didn't necessarily mean recognition or glory. Instead, it meant you survived and continued your duty. You would always be under suspicion, always isolated, and there was no happy ending in the conventional sense. The meritocratic system and forged loyalty created a strong sense of camaraderie, where each soldier felt empowered and had opportunities for advancement. However, the harsh realities often left little room for close personal bonds beyond the unit. The women behind the warriors and the spoils of conquest. While men went off to battle, the women at home faced equally daunting challenges. They had to manage all household tasks, care for children, and tend to livestock. They also had to defend themselves from raiders or hostile tribes. For instance, Tomiris, the queen of the Massagetay tribe, though not a Mongol warrior, demonstrates the resilience and strength of women in that era. She defeated Cyrus the Great of Persia, one of history's most formidable conquerors, to avenge her son. This illustrates that women were not just confined to the home, but could also be leaders, warriors, and capable of making brutal decisions. Or consider Boudica, the queen of the Iceni. While also not Mongol, she too became a symbol of rebellion and resilience. She led a major uprising against the mighty Roman Empire. Women like Tomiris and Boudica, though from different cultures, shared a fierce warrior spirit and incredible endurance in a harsh world. Despite the hardships, the wealth acquired from conquests benefited all Mongols, though unequally. Even ordinary Mongols could afford to wear linen and silk instead of just leather and felt. They could own slaves from the large numbers of war captives and had greater opportunities to improve their social status within an ever-expanding empire. The Mongols also exhibited remarkable religious tolerance, welcoming and supporting various religious traditions, Buddhism, Christianity, Islam, Taoism, as long as they did not become focal points of political opposition. This allowed Muslim proselytizers to spread their faith within the Mongol army and granted Christians far greater freedom than under Islamic rule. Gentle comparisons with contemporary armies. As we've journeyed through the daily life of a Mongol warrior, it becomes clear that their effectiveness stemmed from a unique synergy between their nomadic lifestyle and military innovation. But to truly appreciate their singular path, it's helpful to cast a gentle gaze upon other prominent armies of the 13th and 14th centuries. This era witnessed a remarkable diversity of military systems, from highly mobile nomadic cavalry to entrenched sedentary armies and specialized slave soldier corps. The structure, Capabilities and daily lives of these armies were profoundly shaped by their distinct geographical, socio-economic, and technological factors. Let's briefly touch upon what life might have been like for soldiers in China's Song dynasty, the Mamluk Sultanate, and Devi. Noticing the quiet contrasts, the Song dynasty army, sophistication, internal challenges. Imagine being a soldier in the Song dynasty army of China. Your daily life would have been vastly different from that of a Mongol warrior, largely influenced by being part of a large, centralized, and sedentary force. Instead of endless riding across open steppes, you might have been stationed in garrisons along the Great Wall, guarding against northern incursions. Within cities, soldiers were quartered in barracks and assigned duties like patrolling streets at night, preventing brawls and theft, and warning the public of fires. Your existence would have been one of fixed positions and administrative routine. Your diet, too, would tell a different story. Primarily, you would have eaten rice, soybeans, and vegetables. Meat would have been a rare luxury, not a daily staple as it was for the Mongols. While you received funds to buy food, pickled vegetables, and salt, the government also established massive grain storehouses across the country to feed large armies. Food preservation methods included drying meat into jerky and cooking, or drying grains for military rations. This reliance on fixed agricultural bases and established supply lines contrasted sharply with the Mongols' mobile self-sufficiency. While efficient in peacetime, these fixed supply lines became vulnerable targets during war. The Song army underwent rapid professionalization, moving from a primarily aristocratic force to include common soldiers. They were tested on weapon skills and athletic ability. Soldiers were trained to follow standard signals, advancing when flags waved, and stopping at the sound of bells and drums. The existence of numerous military treatises, like the Wujing Zongyao, suggests a scientific approach to warfare. However, a significant internal challenge lay in their command structure. Fearing military coups, commanders were frequently rotated to prevent them from building loyalty with their troops. This, while aiming to maintain imperial control, undermined unit cohesion and effective battlefield command. It was a system that, despite its discipline, often lacked unity and sometimes hindered initiative on the battlefield. Perhaps the most telling aspect of a Song soldier's life was their social standing. Generally, it was quite low. Soldiers were often viewed as the lowest rung of society, and military examinations were disdained. Recruitment often involved petty criminals, prisoners, and landless peasants, who were frequently tattooed or branded to prevent desertion. Most soldiers lived in poverty, often exploited by their superiors who might cut their pay, cheat on grain distribution, or force them into debt. Confucian ideals in Song society reinforced this low status, with the Confucian elite often holding pacifist views and looking down upon soldiers. This disregard for the military profession weakened fighting morale and overall quality. The Mamluk army, elite slave soldiers and combat prowess. Now shift your gentle gaze to the Mamluk army, a truly unique force composed of professionally trained slave soldiers in Egypt and Syria. These Mamluks, primarily Turkic, Caucasian, and Eastern European in origin, were bought as children and rigorously trained in barracks within the citadel of Cairo. Despite their slave origins, their status was remarkably high, often considered true lords and true warriors, with a higher social standing than the general populace. Their life was largely confined to the barracks, which fostered an incredibly strong esprit de corps. Initially, their movements in and out of the city were restricted, allowed only during the day and requiring return to the barracks at night. Later, they were permitted weekly visits to public baths. In terms of sustenance, Mamluks initially received generous allowances of meat, food, sweets, fruits, and even lavish clothing, along with gold and silver coins. However, these provisions later saw reductions, leading to breakfasts primarily of cooked fava beans due to insufficient funds for meat. Leisure activities included sports like archery competitions and demonstrations of horseback combat skills at least once a week. The Mamluk military training was exceptionally comprehensive, focusing on Furusiya, the mounted arts of horsemanship, lancing, archery, and swordsmanship. Equestrian skills were particularly emphasized, starting with practice on model horses before transitioning to real ones, learning to ride both with and without saddles, and mastering techniques for mounting, dismounting, turning, and proper equipment use. They were proficient with a wide array of weapons, lances including a game called Borgias, archery the Kabak game, swordsmanship cutting through layers of felt, lead, or clay to increase strength and control, sticks, daggers, maces, axes, and crossbows. Group training and riding grounds, Median focused on coordinated cavalry exercises, teaching them to enter, exit, turn right or left, and advance or retreat together. Discipline was incredibly strict, enforced with severe punishments by eunuchs and barrack masters. This intensive, multifaceted training created highly skilled professional cavalry, essential for their military dominance. The focus on Furusiya was not just about learning combat skills, it was about instilling a warrior identity, a chivalric spirit that shaped every aspect of their lives. This process, spanning many years, ensured that each Mamluk was a highly valuable military asset, capable of executing complex tactics and maintaining high combat effectiveness. Their unique non-hereditary merit-based system created a highly professional and devoted fighting force, quite distinct from typical feudal armies. Command positions were held by the most competent, fostering excellence and loyalty to the system. The Devi Army, resilience and adaptability to terrain. Now let's turn our gaze to Devi, a kingdom in Southeast Asia, particularly under the Trin dynasty, renowned for its tenacious resistance against Mongol invasions. The life of a Devi soldier was largely shaped by the Gubin Unum policy, roughly translating to soldiers resting in the fields, a form of militia or citizen soldier system. Under this policy, a portion of the military force was maintained permanently for royal service, while the rest typically worked their own fields. When there was a threat of invasion, the entire populace could be mobilized for military duty. Even local nobles maintained their own armed forces, comprised of peasants and slaves. This Ubin Unum policy allowed for the mobilization of a large force when necessary, but it also meant that the daily life of soldiers differed from full-time professionals. They were farmer soldiers, balancing military duties with agricultural work. This created a highly self-sufficient and resilient force at the local level, though it might have lacked the continuous professionalism of standing armies. Daviate soldiers underwent periodic training, and according to a contemporary Chinese envoy, their training level was very high. Sons of noble families were even trained in military schools to become officers. A powerful symbol of their discipline and unity was the practice of Trin dynasty soldiers tattooing the Chinese characters Sat, that meaning slay the Mongols, onto their arms. This reflected a strong fighting will and a high degree of national solidarity against the enemy. The shared threat and brilliant leadership forged a strong sense of patriotism and collective will, clearly evident in their training and symbol. The tattooing of Set that was not just a symbolic act, but a declaration of unwavering determination, bolstering the morale of both the army and the populace. The Devi army effectively employed a scorched earth strategy against the Mongols, evacuating civilians and supplies, and destroying infrastructure to deny resources to the invaders. They also actively attacked enemy supply lines, particularly Mongol naval fleet. Rivers played a crucial role in both defense and logistics. Agricultural products, especially rice, were their primary food source. Their deep understanding of local geography, rivers, mountains, dense forests, and the scorched earth policy transformed logistical challenges for invaders into strategic advantages for themselves. This ability to live off the land and deny resources to the enemy allowed Devi to sustain prolonged resistance, weakening the Mongols through disease and scarcity. The organization of the Tren Dynasty army involved two main forces: the Forbidden Army, royal guards protecting the capital, and local armies, regional armed forces. Key command positions were reserved for noble and royal families. Despite a feudal structure, this system was adapted to mobilize the masses against external threats, balancing central authority with local initiative. This created a flexible and adaptable military force, capable of mobilizing large numbers of soldiers when needed while maintaining social cohesion and loyalty. Centuries of struggle against foreign invasion shaped a unique Vietnamese cultural identity and deep patriotism, permeating every aspect of their military life. The spirit of national unity and fighting will were not just slogans but living values passed down through generations. This produced a highly motivated fighting force, supported by the entire populace, a crucial factor in their victories against more powerful empires. Comparative analyses in the nomadic mindset. Our journey through the daily lives of these different armies of the 13th and 14th centuries reveals a fascinating tapestry of military adaptation. Each power we've touched upon: the Mongol Empire, the Song Dynasty, the Mamluk Sultanate, and Devi, developed unique military systems, profoundly shaped by their geographical environment, social structures, and cultural values. There was no single, universally superior military model, but rather a testament to the ability to adapt and exploit unique advantages, technology, tactics, and the shaping hand of geography. The Mongols, as we've seen, were masters of horse archery, utilizing their powerful composite bows. Their tactics centered on mobility, feigned retreats, encirclement, psychological warfare, and rapid communication via their yam relay system. They were also quick to adopt siege technologies, like trebuchets from conquered civilizations. Their vast steppe environment fostered this mobility, horsemanship, and endurance. However, their logistical reliance on horse fodder and water sometimes limited them in non-steppe regions. In contrast, the Song dynasty pioneered gunpowder weapons, including rockets, bombs, fire lances, and early cannons. They also developed advanced crossbows and possessed formidable naval power with paddle-wheeled boats. Their riverine and coastal geography significantly influenced their naval development and waterborne transport capabilities. Their sedentary lifestyle, supported by extensive road and canal networks, allowed them to maintain large fixed armies and sophisticated if vulnerable supply lines. The Mamluks focused on heavy cavalry and horse archers, employing handguns to panic enemy horses, trebuchets, and gunpowder artillery. They also used feigned retreats effectively. Their desert and semi-arid environment necessitated the use of camels for transport and restricted the size of large forces due to water scarcity. Their logistical solutions, particularly camel use and water management, were shaped by this geography, enabling them to sustain campaigns in challenging environments. Finally, Devi utilized war elephants, albeit with inconsistent effectiveness, alongside innovative naval ambushes like the bakdang, wooden stakes, guerrilla tactics, scorched earth policies, and attacks on enemy supply lines. They also adopted and developed gunpowder weapons. Their rivers, mountains, and dense forest created ideal conditions for guerrilla warfare and those crucial naval ambushes. Their deep understanding of local geography and scorched earth strategy transformed logistical challenges for invaders into their own strategic advantages. Geography, then, was not merely a backdrop for warfare, It was a fundamental force shaping military strategies, logistical capabilities, and the daily realities of soldiers in each region. Social structures and military effectiveness. Beyond technology and geography, the social structure and cultural values of each society profoundly influenced the morale, discipline, and overall effectiveness of their armies. The Mongols, as we've explored, created high morale and discipline through their meritocratic system, the breaking of tribal loyalties via the decimal system, the sharing of hardships, and potent psychological warfare. This unique meritocratic system and forged loyalty created a strong sense of camaraderie, where each soldier felt empowered and had opportunities for advancement. In stark contrast, the Song dynasty suffered from the low social status of its soldiers and the recruitment of criminals, which led to low morale and reduced effectiveness despite their advanced technology. The bureaucratic control over generals and internal distrust further undermined their military cohesion. The Confucian elite's disdain for soldiers fostered a lack of respect for military skills, weakening combat motivation. The Mamluks, as elite slave soldiers, created a distinct model, highly professional and disciplined. Their non-hereditary system based on merit, strong esprit de corps, and isolation from the local populace generated a force that was both professional and deeply loyal. This unique social standing, rigorous training, and shared experience of being bought and trained forged a collective identity, making them a powerful and culturally significant military class. Finally, David showcased that a society with a strong sense of national unity and patriotism, even with a semi-professional army, could achieve remarkable victories. Their farmer soldiers, noble command, fierce national solidarity, and the Slay the Mongols tattoos demonstrated high morale and popular support. Centuries of struggle against foreign invasion forged a unique Vietnamese cultural identity and deep patriotism, permeating every aspect of their military life. This collective will, combined with the leadership of figures like Trin Hung Drode, was pivotal in their successes against more powerful empires. The enduring nomadic mindset, the constant lifelong training for the Mongol was not merely military preparation, it was a fundamental aspect of steppe survival. Equestrian and archery skills were daily necessities, deeply ingrained into their culture. This continuous exposure to the harsh steppe environment forged unparalleled mobility, endurance, and combat skills from a very young age. It wasn't just about learning, it was about becoming. This nomadic lifestyle forged Mongol soldiers into resilient and resourceful individuals. They were accustomed to enduring extreme conditions, cold, heat, hunger, and thirst, from early childhood. This practical survival skill, encompassing riding and archery, was an integral part of their everyday life. They often found themselves astonished by the luxuries of sedentary life, viewing the softness and comforts with a certain detached curiosity. The Mongol identity as steppe warriors created a formidable psychological advantage. Their nomadic life physically and mentally hardened them, making them remarkably resilient and fearless. Their reputation for brutality, amplified by their policies of destruction, struck terror into the hearts of their enemies, often undermining the will to resist even before a battle truly began. At the same time, the meritocratic system and the loyalty fostered within their ranks created a powerful team spirit, where every soldier felt empowered and saw opportunities for advancement. This combination of superior combat ability, psychological warfare, and a social structure that rewarded talent formed a unique military force, capable of overcoming larger and better equipped armies. The harsh environment didn't just influence their warfare, it fundamentally created their unique military identity and capabilities. This anti-logistics approach, where their supply chain literally moved with them, allowed for unprecedented speed, surprise, and depth of operation, enabling them to sustain campaigns over vast distances and varied terrain where other armies would simply fail due to supply constraints. It was their ability to adapt to their environment, turning its demands into their strengths, that ultimately defined their success. Training is second nature, a deeper dive into early life and the sensory world of youth. As we gently drift deeper into the heart of the Mongol warrior's existence, let's cast our minds back to the very beginning, to childhood, on the vast, boundless steppe. You might assume that modern armies possess the most rigorous training regimens. But for the Mongols, training wasn't a separate specialized program. It was an ingrained part of life from the moment they were. There were no military academies or specialized schools in the way we understand them today. Everything was learned through constant practice and immediate application, starting from a very young age. This wasn't merely preparation for war, it was the very essence of survival, a truth absorbed with every breath, every early morning chill, every sunset that painted the horizon in hues of orange and fading gray. The symphony of childhood training. Imagine being a child, perhaps no older than 3 years old, when your world instantly expanded to include the back of a horse. From that tender age, you were taught not just how to cling to a mount, but how to truly ride, how to become one with the animal, and how to handle a bow. This wasn't a gentle introduction, it was continuous practice, day in and day out, until the age of 16, when you were considered a full warrior. The sounds that would define your early years were unlike anything found in settled lands. There was the persistent, rhythmic thud, thud, thud of horse hooves, not on soft, yielding grass, but on the dry, compacted earth of the steppe. This sound would echo subtly in the vast open silence, a constant drumbeat of movement and purpose. Then, the sharper, almost violent twang of a bowstring, a sound that would become as familiar as your own heartbeat, instantly followed by the faint, almost ethereal hiss of an arrow cutting through the unforgiving air. These were the sounds of proficiency, the sounds of your future. You would hear the shouts of instruction from elders, their voices carried in the unpredictable wind, sometimes sharp and demanding, cutting through the vastness, sometimes low and encouraging, a gentle murmur of affirmation. In the background, the distant melancholic neigh of a foal calling for its mother, or the impatient snort of a mare waiting to be mounted, woven into the ceaseless, almost subliminal sound of the wind, a perpetual, invisible companion on the steppe. The air itself held a complex array of scents, each etched into your memory. There was the pervasive, rich aroma of horses, a warm, earthy smell of hide, dry sweat, and recently turned earth churned by their hooves. It was a comforting smell, the scent of life itself. Mingled with this would be the faint, metallic tang of the bow's raw materials, the sinew and horn that gave them their formidable power. In the crisp, cold morning air, you might catch the distant hint of wood smoke from a small communal cooking fire, or the sharper, acrid smell of dried dung being carefully burned for warmth, a precious resource in the treeless expanses. These were the smells of your home, your classroom, and your survival. And then the physical sensations, a constant gritty reality, the coarse, scratchy feel of rough wool or felt against your young skin, perpetually damp with sweat in the scorching summer, or stiff with frost in the piercing winter. This rough texture was a constant reminder of your attire, designed for function over comfort. There was the persistent ache in your inner thighs and lower back, a dull, nagging protest from hours spent in a saddle that offered little cushioning. Every jarring impact of the horse's stride transmitted directly through your developing body. You would feel fine dust clinging to every exposed patch of skin, collecting under your fingernails, gritty between your teeth, a subtle, ever-present layer. The biting chill that would creep into your small bones, even through layers of thick clothing, making your fingers stiff and slow, forcing you to blow warm air onto them just to maintain dexterity. The unique, almost raw sensation of the wind whipping across your face, chapping your lips and causing your eyes to water, a constant battle against the element. Yet through all of this, you would learn the exquisite, almost unconscious shift of balance required, a continuous, fluid dance with the horse beneath you, becoming a single fluid entity. This wasn't just a skill, it was a second nature, an instinctive response. There was no formal training curriculum in the conventional sense, only the sheer necessity for survival and the desperate need to master your environment. The harsh steppe environment itself served as a natural, continuous training ground, forging unparalleled mobility, endurance, and combat skills, particularly horseback archery, from an early age. The mother's hand, practical education for survival. Women played a crucial role in imparting these fundamental skills. This wasn't merely about abstract teaching, it was about being living models of resilience and skill, balancing domestic duties with the profound responsibility of raising future warriors. Imagine a scene: a mother, perhaps with hands rough from tanning hides and milking mares under the relentless sun, patiently adjusting a child's grip on a small bow, her voice low but firm, her eyes keenly observing every nuance of the child's posture. She knew that this simple lesson was not for academic enrichment, but for the stark reality of life and death that awaited them on the steppe. The sheer patience required to teach these survival skills day in and day out, knowing that every arrow shot, every ride taken, was a step towards a life of constant peril. There was a silent, profound understanding passing between generations that these lessons were the very foundation of existence, the bedrock upon which all future survival depended. The absence of formal schools was filled by the boundless, unforgiving classroom of the steppe itself. Every sunrise brought a new lesson, every challenge a new opportunity to hone skills that meant the difference between life and oblivion. You learned to read the subtle changes in the wind, the almost imperceptible shifts in the terrain, the distant signs of animals or potential threats. You learned patience, discipline, and an unwavering focus that few outside this nomadic existence could ever comprehend. This was not just about riding a horse or shooting an arrow. It was about integrating every aspect of your being with the demands of your environment, becoming an extension of the steppe itself. It was a quiet, relentless education, etched not into textbooks, but into muscle, bone, and the very spirit. Resilience and resourcefulness, the unyielding grip of the elements and the diet of necessity. The constant, lifelong training for the Mongol warrior was not merely military preparation, it was a fundamental aspect of steppe survival. This nomadic lifestyle forged Mongol soldiers into incredibly resilient and resourceful individuals. They were accustomed to enduring extreme conditions, cold, heat, hunger, and thirst from early childhood. This practical survival skill, encompassing riding and archery, was an integral part of their everyday life. The unforgiving embrace of nature. Imagine the constant, unyielding presence of the elements. The steppe was not a gentle land, it was a vast, open expanse that offered little shelter and demanded absolute fortitude. The cold, picture the relentless, piercing cold that would settle deep within your bones, making every movement a conscious, painful effort. It wasn't just a shiver that passed, it was a pervasive, numbing sensation that seeped through every layer of thick wool or sheepskin. Your breath would instantly turn into a cloud of ice crystals, visible with every exhale, a fleeting ghost in the frigid air. You'd feel your fingers losing sensation, becoming clumsy and stiff, and your toes becoming numb within their rough leather boots. There was a desperate, almost animalistic desire for warmth, achieved only through constant motion, huddling closely with your comrades or your animals, or the brief, smoke-filled comfort of a dung fire, its heat quickly dissipating into the vastness. The felt of your thin tent, or jur, would become stiff and unyielding in the frigid temperatures, creaking in the wind like an old protesting ship. You would wake up with the sharp sting of cold seeping into your bones, having slept a fitful, shallow sleep on a rough animal hide spread directly on the cold earth. This biting chill gnawed at every muscle, a constant, grinding reality. The heat. Then there was the oppressive, relentless heat of the summer sun, a blinding glare on the vast treeless plains. The air would shimmer and distort, creating phantom oases that danced on the horizon, mocking your parching thirst. Your throat would feel like sandpaper, your tongue thick and heavy, the overwhelming smell of dry, dusty earth, baked to an almost searing temperature, would mingle with the omnipresent scent of sun-baked horses and dry grass. The incessant drone of insects would add to the oppressive atmosphere, a monotonous background hum that intensified the feeling of discomfort, the unique, almost sticky sensation of sweat drying on your skin, leaving a fine, salty residue that chafed and irritated. You would constantly feel hot and dusty in summer, a perpetual battle against the elements. The scarcity of water. The most profound anxiety, however, was the dwindling of water supplies. Imagine the visual: a muddy, stagnant puddle, its surface often green with algae, yet a source of desperate hope. The taste of this water was often earthy, metallic, sometimes carrying the faint, unsettling flavor of animal waste. The chilling knowledge that every single sip carried the potential risk of illness, a debilitating dysentery that could rapidly become severe and fatal in a world without modern medicine. Each horse, a vital component of the army, needed approximately 5 gallons of water daily, a requirement that could severely limit the size and movement of forces in arid regions. This wasn't just a logistical challenge, it was a constant mental calculation of how much water each horse and human needed. The severe implications of misjudgment. The very sound of water, even a distant trickle, would become a precious, almost sacred melody, a beacon of fleeting hope. The practicality of sustenance. Forget lavish breakfasts with scrambled eggs, crispy bacon, and toasted bread. The first meal of the day for a Mongol warrior was extraordinarily simple, perhaps even unpleasant to your modern palate. Their diet during campaigns relied heavily on animal products, including mare's milk, horse blood, and various meats like mutton, beef, and goat. The Mongols lived by a stark philosophy: meat for men, grass for goat. This high-protein, low-carbohydrate diet significantly contributed to their agility and stamina. Dried meat and kumis. Your meal might consist of a bit of dried meat, tough as limestone and difficult to chew, salvaged from the day before. Picture its incredibly tough, almost fibrous texture, requiring immense effort to chew and swallow, the way it would scrape against your palate, tasting faintly of smoke and salt, but utterly devoid of any tenderness or juiciness. The sheer effort of consuming it was a physical task in itself, a repetitive, grinding motion, or perhaps even more distinctively, a gulp of fermented mare's milk, known as kum. This unique beverage, sometimes pressed into a dried cake, had a sour, effervescent taste and a mild alcoholic content. Imagine its sharp, sour, slightly fizzy taste, completely alien to a modern palate. The thin, almost watery consistency, yet its surprising ability to provide energy and a mild, dulling buzz that could momentarily soften the edges of constant discomfort. It would coat your mouth with a unique, slightly chalky film. Emphasize this: there was a complete absence of flavor or enjoyment as we understand it in modern cuisine. Sustenance was purely functional, a matter of raw survival, designed simply to fuel your body and give you the raw energy needed to continue the relentless journey. There were no sweet pastries, no fresh vegetables, just extreme practicality. This demands an adaptation that is not merely physical, but deeply mental. You would have to accept that delicious is a luxury not afforded to you. This anti-vegetable diet reinforced reliance on their nomadic pastoral economy. The constant movement of their army also reduced the need for vulnerable traditional supply lines. This nomadic diet and lifestyle ensured they were largely self-sufficient, a crucial element in their strategic advantage. The psychological edge, fear, forged identity, and the absence of solace. Beyond the physical hardships and the relentless rhythm of nomadic life, there was a profound psychological dimension to being a Mongol warrior. Their identity, forged in the crucible of the steppe, and their unique military discipline, created a formidable psychological advantage, not just for them, but against their enemies. The pervasive shadow of terror, the Mongol identity, as steppe warriors created a formidable psychological advantage. Their reputation for brutality, amplified by their policies of destruction, struck terror into the hearts of their enemies, often undermining the will to resist even before a battle truly began. Imagine for a moment the insidious way news of their conquests would spread like wildfire, carried by terrified refugees streaming away from the horizon, their faces etched with horror, and desperate envoys arriving at city gates with tales of unimaginable destruction. Picture the visual: a city's gates, once proud and unbreachable, now hanging broken and useless on their hinges, a stark, grim testament to the fate of those who dared to resist. The lingering stench of smoke from a recently sacked town, a sickly sweet and acrid aroma, carried for miles on the wind, serving as a visceral, undeniable warning to any who might consider defiance. You might hear the destined, unsettling sound of a collective wail, or the sudden, unnatural silence of a once bustling trade route now completely devoid of life, a chilling void. This psychological surrender often preceded physical defeat, a war waged not just with arrows and sabers, but with the chilling certainty of absolute destruction. The sheer, overwhelming feeling of hopelessness among their enemies was a weapon as potent as any composite. Genghis Khan's policy was clear: those who surrender will be spared, but those who resist will be destroyed with their wives and children and relatives, so that others who hear and see will be afraid and will not act likewise. This was not merely a declaration, it was a promise kept with terrifying consistency. Captives and human shields, a dehumanizing reality. You, as a Mongol warrior, would participate in these activities. You would have to execute brutal orders, witness horrific scenes, and perhaps even commit such acts yourself. During sieges of cities, the Mongol army was famous for its strategy of hot living. They wouldn't waste time or resources feeding prisoners or civilians. Instead, they would destroy everything, take what was useful as plunder, and burn the rest. This was both a punishment for the enemy and a way to ensure no threat lingered behind them. This approach also acted as a form of psychological warfare, encouraging surrender. Now consider the chilling reality of captives being used as human shields in sieges or to fill moats. Imagine the desperate eyes of men, women, and even children being forced to the front lines of a siege, their bare bodies exposed to the hail of enemy arrows and stones, their desperate pleas unheard. Their silence, often born of terror, was more profound than any scream. The subtle sound of their shuffling feet, the almost inaudible prayers, the gasps of their final breath. This was not just a cold, calculating tactic. It was a brutal, visceral demonstration of absolute power and a complete disregard for human life outside their own rank. This would undoubtedly impact your psyche, potentially making you more hardened, less emotional. This was not a life where you could retain your innocence or your compassion. The internal landscape, loyalty and isolation, discipline within the Mongol army was absolute. Genghis Khan fundamentally reorganized Mongol society into a decimal military structure based on units of 10 arban, 100, 1,000, and 10,000 tumen. This system was designed to break down traditional tribal loyalties and foster direct allegiance to the Khan and the new military unit. Each arban was considered a fundamental unit of both military and social life, expected to live and fight as brothers. Genghis Khan solidified loyalty by sharing the hardships with his soldiers and leading from the front lines. This unique meritocratic system and forged loyalty created a strong sense of camaraderie, where each soldier felt empowered and had opportunities for advancement regardless of their social standing or background. However, this meritocracy was also a double-edged sword. While offering opportunity, it also meant constant vigilance, a perpetual striving for excellence. There was a subtle tension within units, knowing that incompetence or weakness, even a momentary lapse, could lead to not only your own demise but the demise of your comrade. The chilling reality of collective punishment was a profound, visceral fear that would bind a unit more tightly than any oath. Desertion in battle was punished by the execution of all members of the deserting soldier's unit. This created an incredibly tight-knit bond within units, reinforced by a shared and palpable fear of collective punishment. You wouldn't dare betray your comrades, because death awaited all if one faltered. The unspoken code of absolute mutual reliance was not just about trust, it was about survival, because the alternative was unthinkable. The psychological toll of living under such unforgiving stakes, where your life literally depended on the unwavering performance of everyone around you, was immense. Yet despite being always part of a collective, the life of a Mongol warrior was also profoundly solitary. You couldn't completely trust anyone outside your immediate most crucial unit, because everyone was fighting for their own survival. You would have to keep your deepest thoughts and most vulnerable emotions to yourself. There was no concept of retirement or a peaceful life after the war. You either died on the battlefield, or you continued fighting until you could no longer endure. Success in the Mongol army didn't necessarily mean recognition or glory. Instead, it simply meant you survived and continued your duty. You would always be under suspicion, always isolated, and there was no happy ending in the conventional sense. The harsh realities often left little room for close personal bonds beyond the immediate functional unit. The quiet stoicism that became a necessity for survival, a profound inner solitude amidst the endless movement of the horde. The living weapon and mobile logistics, nuance and sensory detail. The inherent skill base, combined with their meritocratic system and decentralized command, fostered innovation and tactical adaptability, defining their military success. The environment didn't just influence their warfare, it fundamentally created their unique military identity and capabilities. This anti-logistics approach, where their supply chain literally moved with them, allowed for unprecedented speed, surprise, and depth of operation, enabling them to sustain campaigns over vast distances and varied terrain where other armies would simply fail due to supply constraints. It was their ability to adapt to their environment, turning its demands into their strengths, that ultimately defined their success. The living weapon, a symphony of integration. The emphasis of Mongol training was not merely military preparation, but a fundamental aspect of steppe survival. Equestrian and archery skills were daily necessities, deeply ingrained into their culture. This continuous exposure to the harsh steppe environment forged unparalleled mobility, endurance, and combat skills from a very young age. It wasn't just about learning, it was about becoming. Imagine what it meant to truly embody the concept of a living weapon. It was a profound integration of man, animal, and equipment, all working in seamless, terrifying harmony. Consider the subtle sensations of this integration. The constant weight of your gear, about 22 pounds, 10 kilon of lamellar armor, made from leather or metal, 2 to 3 bows, 60 arrows per quiver, and a file to sharpen your arrowheads, becoming an extension of your own body. You would learn to move with it, sleep in it, fight in it, until its presence was almost unnoticed. A second skin. Your horses, 3 to 5 per soldier, were not just mounts, they were a dynamic, moving larder, a mobile fuel source, a crucial component of your logistical independence. The pervasive presence of multiple horses in the animal-centric diet were not isolated facts. They interconnected to form a cohesive system. The ability to ride continuously for days was directly supported by having spare horses. This anti-vegetable diet reinforced reliance on their nomadic pastoral economy. Each piece, the horse, the specialized diet, the robust equipment, the ceaseless training, contributed to the overall seamless functioning of the military unit, transforming each soldier into an effective living weapon. Mobile logistics, the unseen force of the horde, while seemingly disinterested in logistics, their system was sophisticated, with their supply chain literally moving with them. Their lack of traditional fixed supply lines was, in fact, their greatest logistical advantage. By integrating resupply horses for food transport, mobility, multiple horses, riding endurance, and communication, the Urtu relay system directly into their army structure and daily soldier life, they created a dynamic, self-sufficient logistical system that overcame the weaknesses of conventional armies. This allowed for unprecedented speed, surprise, and operational depth. They could sustain campaigns over vast distances and varied terrain where other armies would falter due to supply constraints. This anti-logistics approach was, in essence, a highly developed form of mobile logistics. Imagine the subtle, almost imperceptible sounds of a massive herd of horses, thousands upon thousands, constantly moving across the steppe. The soft thud of hooves on the vast open ground, a deep, rhythmic vibration that resonated through the earth. The occasional snort, the rustle of leather, the faint jingle of bells as they grazed or were herded. The dust clouds they raised were not just visual, they were a physical presence, fine particles coating everything, settling on your skin, your hair, and the rough felt of your tent. The way the landscape itself would subtly, almost imperceptibly change under their continuous passage. The grass flattened, the earth compacted. This wasn't just logistical efficiency, it was a fundamental strategic advantage, giving them the chilling ability to appear seemingly out of nowhere, bypassing traditional defenses and supply lines. The feeling of invincibility this must have given them, the sheer psychological impact on their sedentary enemies, was immense. The Urtu Yen system, the nervous system of the empire. And then there was the quiet logistical miracle of the Urtu or Yem relay system. This was not just a postal service, it was the nervous system of their immense empire, binding distant commands to the central authority with astonishing speed. Imagine the outposts, rough utilitarian stations, often no more than a few jurs and a fresh string of horses, scattered across the vast, lonely expanses of the steppe. The pervasive smell of exhausted horses arriving, a mixture of sweat and dust, quickly replaced by the cleaner, more vibrant scent of fresh mounts. The quick, efficient exchange of riders and messages, a hurried whisper of crucial information passed from one hand to another, no time for pleasantries. The characteristic thud-thud-thud of a fresh horse galloping away, the rhythmic beat, fading into the distance with astonishing speed, only to be replaced minutes or hours later by another rider arriving from the opposite direction. This constant flow of information allowed the vast empire to coordinate its movements and conquests with a precision that was unmatched by any contemporary army. It facilitated not just messages, but the rapid movement of officials, small detachments of soldiers, and urgent supplies. The feeling of being on the receiving end of a message, the urgency it conveyed, the immediate action it demanded, it connected you directly to the pulse of the empire. The immense human and animal toll of maintaining this system was staggering. Countless horses ridden to exhaustion, riders who spent their entire lives on these lonely, demanding routes, sacrificing individual well-being for the greater, chillingly efficient good of the empire. This intricate, unseen network of human effort and animal endurance allowed for their unprecedented speed and reach. All right, let's continue this quiet journey into the past. We will now delve into the unseen costs, perpetual discomfort, and the erosion of softness, pushing deeper into the subtle, relentless hardships that defined their daily life. The unseen costs, perpetual discomfort, and the erosion of softness, as we've explored the grand strategies and the harsh training that shaped the Mongol warrior. It's easy to overlook the myriad of persistent discomforts that permeated every single moment of their existence. These weren't dramatic, life-threatening events, but a constant, grinding reality that slowly, subtly eroded any concept of softness. Or there were no modern conveniences, no quick solutions, just the raw, unadorned truth of a life lived at the mercy of the elements and the demands of an unyielding military machine. Imagine living in a perpetual state of subtle irritation, where the body and mind constantly adapted to conditions that most of us would find unbearable for even a day. The grinding physical reality, more than just hardship. Life on the steppe meant a constant battle against the physical environment, a never-ending series of small defeats against comfort. It was a reality far removed from any sense of personal luxury or even basic modern amenity. The pervasive dampness in suit. Imagine for a moment that feeling when your linen cloak or whatever rough outer garment you wore got thoroughly wet. It didn't just feel damp, it would cling to you in ways that defied geometry, heavy, cold, and taking an agonizingly long time to dry. Picture its cumbersome weight, dragging against your shoulders, sticking unpleasantly to your skin with every movement, inhibiting any fluidity or ease. This wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a constant, almost maddening source of chafing. The rough, damp fabric would rub relentlessly against your perpetually moving limbs, leading to raw, irritated skin, perhaps in the crook of your elbows, behind your knees, or where your saddle met your thighs. This persistent irritation was a dull, ever-present ache, a physical reminder of the lack of proper materials and methods for staying dry. There was no waterproof technology or modern Gore-Tex. Everything was natural, raw, and you simply had to accept the persistent discomfort. And then there was the soot, not just a faint residue, but a thick, pervasive presence. The thick soot from the cooking fires often clung to your lungs, and you could feel fine dust coating your skin, your hair, and even settling lightly on your food. Imagine the microscopic detail of it, fine black dust coating the inside of your nose and throat, causing a perpetual tickle and a dry, raspy cough that you would quickly learn to ignore, as everyone around you likely had the same affliction. Think of the subtle grittiness under your eyelids, making them feel heavy, tired, and slightly inflamed, as if they were perpetually strained. This soot would permeate the rough felt of their tents, making everything subtly gray and smelling faintly of burnt organic matter. a smell that would cling to your clothes even after airing. It was a constant futile effort to feel clean, when cleanliness as we know it was an impossible ideal, a luxury reserved for another world entirely. The misery of footwear and skin. Your leather boots, once wet, would quickly become a source of chafing and misery. Picture the sensation of them hardening and stiffening after a drenching rain, then slowly, agonizingly drying into a shape that no longer quite fit your foot, pinching here, rubbing there. This inevitably led to blisters, then open sores on your feet, compounded by the constant pressure of riding and walking for endless miles. The persistent, dull ache in the arches and balls of your feet, a constant protest from neglected muscles and strained tendons. Below the cuffs of your clothing, there would be an almost permanent layer of dust and dried mud on your lower legs, regardless of how often you tried to brush it off, a testament to the ceaseless movement through varied terrain. And your hands, constantly exposed to the relentless wind and sun, would feel dry, cracked, and rough, the skin often splitting around the knuckles, a quiet testament to a life devoid of moisturizing creams or protective gloves. You would constantly feel damp and chilled in winter, hot and dusty in summer. This was a perpetual battle against the elements. Sleep, a brief respite, never true rest. As darkness descended, life didn't get any easier. You would sleep a fitful, shallow sleep, not on a soft mattress, but on a rough animal hide, spread directly on the cold earth. Imagine the sounds that would prevent any truly deep rest. The distant, uneasy whinny of a horse, the soft shifting and murmuring of comrades in the cramped, thin felt tent, the constant whisper of the wind against the felt fabric, a sound that could be soothing or unsettling, depending on its intensity. Perhaps the distant howl of a wolf, a stark reminder of the wildness surrounding you, or the sudden jarring noise of a falling branch outside. There was always a subtle tension, a sense that you were never entirely safe. Your body, never truly entering a state of deep recovery, would wake up still tired, muscles stiff and aching, the bones feeling heavy and resistant. The absence of a true pillow, the rough hide providing little comfort for your head. The unique, earthy smell of the sleeping area, a thick mixture of animal hide, dried sweat, and damp earth, a scent that would be the last thing you noticed before drifting into a restless sleep, and the first thing to greet you upon waking. All right, let's continue. We will now expand on the absence of conveniences, a microcosm of hardship, delving into the profound impact of lacking what we consider basic amenities. The absence of conveniences, a microcosm of hardship. In our modern world, we often take for granted the myriad conveniences that define our daily lives: fresh running water, clean facilities, readily available medical care. But for the Mongol warrior, these were not just luxuries, they were concepts utterly alien to their existence. The absence of these simple comforts created a constant, subtle friction, a persistent, dull ache that permeated every aspect of their day, demanding a profound level of adaptation. Hygiene as a forgotten concept. Forget the modern conveniences of sanitation you're accustomed to. For the Mongol warrior, personal hygiene as we know it was a distant notion, or at least radically different from what you might imagine. Water was a precious commodity, typically reserved for drinking or for cooking. There was no concept of a clean daily shower. The absence of a shower. Imagine the constant, subtle stickiness of dried sweat on your skin, a perpetual film that never truly rinsed away. The feeling of oily hair, perpetually tangled and dusty, often matted from days or weeks without washing. The persistent, almost animalistic body odor that everyone shared, becoming so normalized that it was no longer consciously noticed. yet undeniably present in the collective atmosphere of the camp. Consider the specific feeling of your teeth coated in a persistent film, the absence of the crisp, clean sensation of fresh breath. This wasn't just a matter of unpleasantness, it was a fundamental aspect of their reality. The luxury of clean water, so readily available to us, was reserved strictly for survival, for drinking, for hydrating the precious horses, for the most basic cooking. It was never wasted on mere comfort. You would quickly learn to accept the scent of your own body and that of those around you because it was an inseparable part of nomadic life. Latrines and privacy. Now let's turn to the intimate yet profoundly public matter of latrines. In the Mongol army, there were no public latrines or even properly dug pit toilets. When nature called, you simply found a nearby bush or the most discreet spot you could and attended to your needs. This was not only inconvenient, but also potentially dangerous. You could easily become separated from your unit or spotted by an enemy scout. Imagine the visual of scattered human waste on the ground around temporary camps, the subtle, acrid smell that would mingle with other camp odors, especially in warmer weather, adding another layer to the complex scent profile of their existence. The complete lack of shame or modesty in attending to bodily functions in public was a necessary adaptation, a swift erasure of personal boundaries. And privacy? It was an utterly foreign concept. You would live, eat, sleep, and fight in a crowded collective. Everyone was in close proximity, and there was no true personal space. This demands a significant psychological adaptation. You would have to learn to overlook the constant inconveniences, to coexist with others in a confined space, and to accept the complete absence of solitary moment. Medicine, beyond primitive, towards desperation. Illness was a constant threat in the Mongol army. There were no field hospitals equipped with modern medical supplies. Physicians, if available, often relied on folk remedies and rudimentary treatments, sometimes involving strange rituals. Imagine the grim reality of primitive medicine, where a minor ailment could quickly escalate into a life-threatening condition. Picture the visual: a small festering wound, perhaps from a bramble snagging your arm during a ride, or a minor cut from a dull knife. You'd watch it slowly re-red and swell, radiating an uncomfortable heat. The specific sickly sweet smell of infection and odor of decay would emanate from it. Without antiseptic or proper care, this seemingly insignificant injury would invariably fester, turning into angry red lines that crept up your limb, then blackening as deadly infection spread throughout your body. The only sound might be a quiet groan of pain or the rough rasping cough of a comrade struggling for breath, a deep wet sound that signaled impending doom as fever took hold. The raw, unfiltered pain of an untreated injury, the burning sensation of a fever, the debilitating cramps of dysentery that would leave you utterly weak and vulnerable. Common ailments like dysentery, fevers, or infected wounds could rapidly become severe and fatal. A small cut on your skin could quickly lead to blood poisoning and the end of your life. This was the psychological burden you carried every single day, the constant fear of disease. And if you fell ill, you would quickly become a burden to the entire. The brutal reality was that you might be left behind, a small, lonely figure shrinking into the vastness of the steppe, or worse, eliminated to ensure the pace of the march. The desperation of folk remedies, perhaps a poultice of unknown herbs applied with grim hope, sometimes miraculously effective, more often utterly useless. The quick, decisive, and often brutal decisions made when someone became a burden to the march reflected a stark, cold reality of nomadic life, where weakness was rarely tolerated. There was no safety net, no hospital, no recovery period. just the relentless indifference of the environment to human suffering. Their ability to adapt to their harsh environment was key to sustaining their power and expanding their influence. All right, let's continue this quiet, introspective journey into the Mongol warrior's inner world. We will now expand the mental landscape, acceptance and adaptation, exploring the subtle yet profound psychological shifts required to endure such an unforgiving existence. The mental landscape, acceptance and adaptation, beyond the visible hardships of the steppe and the gnawing physical discomforts, there lay an even deeper transformation, the subtle, almost imperceptible reshaping of the mind. To survive, the Mongol warrior had to undergo a profound mental adaptation, a quiet redefinition of what life meant and what one could expect from it. This wasn't a conscious decision made overnight, but a gradual, relentless erosion of what we, in our modern world, would consider basic expectations of comfort and normalcy. The eradication of comfort. You would quickly come to realize that comfort was a luxury. The goal was survival, and your clothing was a tool for that purpose, not for your ease. Imagine the very concept of comforts slowly, relentlessly eroding from your mind. It wasn't just that it was absent, it ceased to be a valid expectation, a thing to be longed for. The idea of softness, of consistent warmth, of effortless ease would gradually become alien. Your new definition of comfort would become remarkably simple. It was merely the absence of immediate acute pain, the ability to continue moving, to find enough to eat, to quell the most immediate gnawing hunger. This internal shift was profound. Your body and mind would stop expecting or desiring ease, embracing instead the constant, gnawing discomfort as the fundamental state of being. There was a quiet, almost meditative state of acceptance that would settle in. You wouldn't rail against the cold, the heat, the dust, or the hunger. You would simply exist within it, a part of it, much like the very earth and sky. This mental discipline, this acceptance of perpetual hardship, was perhaps one of the most powerful, yet least understood, adaptations that allowed the Mongol army to endure and conquer vast distances and diverse environments. It meant that internal resistance, that subtle psychological drain of wanting things to be better, was simply extinguished. The relentless rhythm of the march as a state of being. The Mongol army was legendary for its incredible marching speed. They could cover hundreds of miles in just a few days, a feat almost unimaginable for other armies of their era. This meant you would spend the vast majority of your day on horseback, constantly moving. There were no comfortable rest stops or relaxing picnic breaks. The relentless pace of the march would become the very rhythm of your life. This wasn't just travel, it was a perpetual state of flux, a constant low-level vibration through your entire being. The subtle rocking motion of the horse beneath you would become the new normal, so ingrained that even when dismounted you might feel a phantom sway, a ghostly continuation of the movement. The landscape itself would endlessly blur past, a monotonous repetition of step, broken only by occasional fleeting glimpses of distant hills or sparse forests. The steady clatter of hooves, the creak of saddles, and the persistent whistle of the wind against your ears would be the sounds you hear most often. You would learn to doze off in the saddle, to eat and drink even while galloping. Your body would have to adapt to the constant vibrations, the jarring shocks from the uneven terrain. You'd feel every joint protest, every muscle tighten. This was a type of fatigue you've never experienced, a deep exhaustion that goes beyond the physical, permeating your very spirit. It was a bone-weary fatigue that no amount of sleep could truly alleviate, only momentarily dull. The concept of rest became relative, a momentary pause in the relentless advance. Time itself seemed to stretch and compress, marked not by hours but by distance covered, and the sun's position relative to the horizon. The mental discipline required to simply endure this monotony, this unyielding physical fatigue, this constant jarring was immense. It was a testament to a mind that had learned to shut down the parts that registered discomfort and simply exist in the forward motion. The loss of innocence and the hardening of spirit. When actual battle erupted, you would find yourself in an entirely different world. Everything became chaotic, brutal, and focused on a singular objective: survival. The gentle hum of the steppe wind would be replaced by a cacophony of screams, the groans of the wounded, the clang of metal on metal, and the thunderous roar of horse hoofs. It would all blend into one horrific symphony. You would face death from every angle. This was not a life where you could retain your innocence or your compassion. The Mongol battlefield was not a place for the faint of heart. There were no fair rules or honor in Mongol warfare. The goal was victory at any cost. Imagine the quiet desensitization that would occur, the witnessing of brutality, the execution of harsh orders, the inevitable participation in acts that would be unimaginable in another life, the sight of cities utterly annihilated, the grim reality of captives used as human shields in sieges or to fill moats. This was not merely about being a witness, it was about participating. The subtle, almost imperceptible hardening of the heart would become a necessary defense mechanism against the overwhelming cruelty of their world. Emotions would become dulled, compassion a dangerous weakness, an internal vulnerability that could not be afforded. The shift in your moral compass would be fundamental, where personal survival and the survival of your unit became the sole guiding principle. There was no room for true reflection or remorse, as such feelings would be a burden in their existence, a luxury of conscience that nomadic warfare simply did not permit. This profound internal shift, the quiet sacrifice of one's softer humanity, was a cornerstone of their formidable military effectiveness. Conclusion. And just like that, we have gently journeyed through a day, or perhaps merely a glimpse of a day, in the life of a Mongol warrior. It's a life defined by unrelenting hardship, by the rhythmic beat of horse hooves, by the scent of smoke and dry grass, and by an iron discipline forged from the earliest years of childhood. We've seen how their unique blend of nomadic living and military innovation shaped every facet of their existence. Their self-sufficiency, extraordinary mobility, and strict discipline, all rooted in the harsh steppe environment, transformed each soldier into an effective living weapon. The Mongol army's mobile logistical system and merit-based command structure allowed them to sustain campaigns across vast distances and varied terrains, overcoming more traditional armies. In stark contrast, we lightly touched upon the Song Dynasty army, which despite its advanced gunpowder technology and naval power, was hindered by the low social status of its soldiers and excessive administrative control. The Mamluk army, on the other hand, presented a unique model, a professional force of elite slave soldiers. Their rigorous training and disciplined isolation created a fiercely loyal and highly skilled fighting force. And finally, Davy demonstrated incredible resilience and adaptability, utilizing their soldiers resting in the fields policy and unique terrain to successfully resist Mongol invasions, fueled by a strong sense of national identity. Perhaps now you have a slightly clearer understanding of why even a single day in the Mongol army would be an almost insurmountable challenge for most of us today. It wasn't just about physical strength, it was about a profound mental fortitude, an unparalleled ability to adapt to a life stripped bare of every comfort, a life of constant brutal demands. Each breath was a test, every step a struggle. It's a quiet reminder of the vast differences between eras and of the incredible resilience humanity has shown throughout history. Thank you for joining me on this gentle historical journey tonight. Thank you for lending your precious time to listen. I hope these quiet explorations have offered you a moment of peace and a gentle passage into slumber. Now let these thoughts slowly dissolve like wisps of smoke drifting across the vast steppe. Let the soft whispers of the wind through felt tents, the distant rhythmic clatter of horse hooves, and the faint, lingering scent of ancient campfires guide you into a deep, peaceful sleep. Sweet dreams, and may your rest be truly undisturbed.